The hard science of reincarnation. All over the world, scholars studying reincarnation are making findings even skeptics have difficulty explaining. Now, I'm one for believing that for which there is evidence, meaning if there is good evidence for reincarnation, I will follow it. I have no interest in pushing for a reality to be something I want it to be. Instead, I want to understand reality as it actually is. That being said, the title and subtitle of this article from Vice combine to make a pretty potent claim. So let's take a look and see if there really is something to it. Before we push into the meat of the article, we should quickly define hard science. Merriam-Webster defines it as a science such as chemistry, physics, or astronomy that deals with things that can be observed and measured. This is the backbone of what we generally think of as science. The ability to do experiments, get reproducible results, and make predictions. This is why psychology, for instance, isn't generally considered a hard science. There is a lot of wiggle room when it comes to people's personal experiences and interpretations of the world around them. The article begins with the story of Ryan Hammonds, a 4-year-old in 2009, who started talking about going home to Hollywood and pleaded with his mother, Cindy, to take him to see his other family. He would yell action and pretend to direct films when he played with his friends. He knew scenes from a cowboy movie he had never watched, and said a cafe reminded him of Paris, where he had never been. He talked about his child, worldly travels, and his job at an agency where people changed their names. Ryan then started having nightmares where he would wake up clutching his chest, telling his mother Cindy that he couldn't breathe and that his heart had exploded in Hollywood. But they didn't live in Los Angeles. Hammond's family resided in Oklahoma. In February 2010, Cindy wrote a letter to the Division of Perceptual Studies at the University of Virginia School of Medicine. The article then states, "Within weeks, they wrote back. Ryan was far from alone in having memories of a past life." Let's stop here for a minute and take stock of what we've read so far. For starters, the title and subtitle indicate there is hard science around the study of reincarnation, meaning there is strong evidence, controlled, repeatable studies, and it carries with it predictive capabilities. Or the author or editor of the article simply put these claims there as clickbait. Well, we can't know for sure quite yet, but either the author will give us evidence, which will be amazing, or she won't, and instead we'll see the deceptive nature of the article. In the body of the article, we see a style of writing that presents the story about the child, Ryan, as being factual. The author does not use language that would call into doubt the veracity and authenticity of the story. Plus, the last sentence we read was, "Ryan was far from alone in having memories of a past life." This sentence gives the impression that he was, indeed, having memories of a past life. We don't see that perhaps the whole thing was just made up. It's not like people don't invent these types of stories, such as abduction stories, stories about going to heaven, etc. We don't see that perhaps the child saw something or heard stories from his friends the mother was simply unaware of. It's presented as simple fact. I see this type of writing as a spin-off of poisoning the well. It's when the writer presents something as fact early on to get the readers to believe something is true, or at least prime them to accept something is true, even if there is no actual evidence of it actually being true. Plus, when a writer loads the beginning of an article with one perspective, the reader will be less likely to accept counterarguments that may be presented much further down, if the reader gets to that point in the article at all. The result of this type of deception is that the reader will walk away from the article believing there is evidence for something for which there is no evidence. This is unfortunately a very common form of deception used not only in science journalism, but by both conservative and liberal media outlets in a wide array of topics. So, getting back to the article, the author goes on to talk about the history of the department that Cindy wrote the letter to at the University of Virginia, which I'll skip. Dr. Jim Tucker, the director of the Division of Personality Studies, read the letter and in 2010 flew out to Oklahoma where Cindy and her son lived. We now will see two large issues that we should take immediate note of. The article writes, with help from a TV crew, Having a TV crew there would put pressure on everyone to reach a certain conclusion that would make for good television. That was following Ryan's case. They identified the man in the photo. The photo was one of many that Cindy and Ryan looked at from old Hollywood books she checked out from the library. Ryan claimed to be one of the people in an old photo from 1932. They identified the man in the photo from Night After Night as Marty Martin, who died in 1964. Tucker showed Ryan photos of people Martin had known in sets of 4, asking if anyone looked familiar. He later realized this wording was too vague, especially for a 6-year-old, but Ryan did pick out Martin's wife, saying that she looked familiar, but that he wasn't sure how he knew her. How many people did Martin know that Ryan didn't pick out? We have serious statistical issues here. Together, they flew to Los Angeles and met Martin's daughter, who'd been 8 years old when her father had died. Ryan was confused to find she had grown. Was he confused? Maybe, but why? By now, with so many people around him, there are a lot of psychological pressures on him to answer questions in a certain way, even if the people around him aren't consciously pushing him. We have quite literally no idea what is real in his head and what isn't. Humans in general, and children specifically, are known to create memories inspired by people and events around them, memories that never actually happen. The entire situation with Ryan is now so polluted, it would be quite practically impossible for anybody to actually know what's going on in Ryan's head. The head, remember, of a 6-year-old, 4 when this whole thing started. Tucker fact-checked some of Ryan's memories with Martin's daughter. A lot of the details proved accurate, a lot of them did not. Some couldn't be verified. What is a lot, and how accurate? Humans are very good at finding patterns in random or non-connected data. How specific were the details? An example of this could be the following. Let's say back in 2000, I predicted there would be a great world war in 2020. Now that it's 2021, were my predictions accurate? Well, you'd probably say no. But if you wanted to believe me for some reason or another, regardless of the reason, maybe I'm the leader of a cult and you're part of it, you could argue that the prediction I made was actually correct. I never said who would be fighting who in this war, so it could be claimed that humans fought a war on COVID, which killed millions. This may seem silly, but these types of mental gymnastics are extremely common when we are actively looking for evidence of something to be true. Martin had acted as an extra in movies before becoming a talent agent. He and his wife had traveled the globe. Ryan had talked about dancing on Broadway, which Tucker thought unlikely for someone who'd been an extra with no lines. But Martin's daughter verified those memories. What does Tucker know about Broadway and acting? Why should his guess about whether or not an actor would be a dancer on Broadway and have unspoken lines in other movies be valid? Again, this is something that could be used as evidence by someone who wants Ryan's story to be true. He had mentioned 2 sisters and a mother with curly brown hair, also true. He recalled his address having Rock or Mount in its name, and Martin's last address was 825 North Roxbury. Maybe some of the photos they looked at had the actor's family in them. Maybe Ryan overheard some of the TV crew talking about the actor. Maybe this was a flat guess that turned out right. Who knows? We don't know how many things Ryan got right and how many he got wrong. Of those things he got right, we don't know where he got the information. The Rock versus Roxbury is definitely a stretch. And what if his address had been 825 North Main Street? Would that have been seen as evidence against reincarnation? Or would it have simply been ignored like the other claims Ryan got wrong? Again, this situation is so completely unscientific, it's truly impossible to reach any actual conclusions. Remember in the beginning of the article that talked about Ryan's nightmares of his heart exploding in Hollywood? They are what pushed his mother to reach out to the University of Virginia. Well, the article goes on to say, but his heart had not exploded. Martin had leukemia and died of a cerebral hemorrhage in 1964. Ryan had also said that his father had raised corn and died when he was still a child, which didn't prove accurate. Still, the case presented strong evidence for reincarnation, Tucker wrote in his 2013 book, Return to Life, in which he documented this story, but it was certainly not definitive. Strong evidence? Really? There is strong evidence of anything if you want it to be true and you look for any arbitrary connections or coincidences. No, this has all the appearances of someone who spent years researching reincarnation and who found evidence in places he, as a scientist, should have known better than to find it. Am I claiming that reincarnation absolutely does not exist? No. Do I think there should not be any research into it? No. We should be open to research into pretty much anything. The problem is when the researchers have a bias and the research methods used are unscientific at best. I'm not going to dig into the rest of the article as there's not much to it, but there is an interesting paragraph that includes a quote from Christopher French, a professor of psychology at Goldsmiths, University of London, who, although a self-defined skeptic on reincarnation, has done research into it. The article says, French thinks the most plausible explanation for the majority of cases is that the children are experiencing false memories, though he maintains respect for Stevenson's meticulous research. I think they are false memories that have arisen as a result of a kind of interesting social psychological interaction between the child and those around them, he argued. You do wonder to what end the researchers are kind of just finding the things that match what's going on. He thinks that young children will often say things that don't make sense to their parents when they first start to speak, and the parents will then inadvertently feed them information as they begin to wonder whose life the child could be describing. Perhaps showing them photographs and asking if they remember the people in the picture, and having this interaction that ultimately will produce a situation where they've unintentionally implanted false memories, as French put it. If you want to read the full article, the link is in the description. This article is quite deceptive in that it doesn't really provide any alternative opinions or views of the reincarnation until near the end, and the tone of the article up until then is one of, this is all kind of true. And when it does finally present an alternative view, it's simple, quick, and adds very little to the article as a whole. Many people won't read the entire article and will therefore walk away convinced that this is further evidence of reincarnation. This type of science journalism is incredibly common, and it's why so many scientists get frustrated with the bad information presented to the public. Many of the journalists who write these articles, it seems, are not interested in presenting the science or the truth, but sensationalizing or misrepresenting to get views and therefore money. If the editor's advice are willing to put this low-quality article on their site, what else will they publish? This kind of reporting really needs to stop. Expect more from your news. My name is Eric Schmidt, and I thank you very much for the view. If you like what I do, please like and subscribe. It helps more than you could possibly know. If you take issue with anything in my video, please comment below and let me know. But please provide evidence and reason, not simply assertions. Have a wonderful day. Goodbye.